Hello, my lovelies. Welcome back to the Geek Suite. I'm your host, the one and only Kid Nerbean, and we're back for another episode of Angry Nerd Rant Time. And before we get into today's Angry Nerd Rant, be sure to hit like and subscribe and ring that notification bell so you don't miss out on any of our wonderful Geek Suite content. Alrighty, my lovelies. Last time on Angry Nerd Rant, we talked about Animal Crossing New Horizons, and we're keeping that ball rolling because I got a lot of feels about this, and we're gonna talk it out. Alrighty, my lovelies, let's get into it. Okay, so on our last Angry Nerd Rant, I talked about how Tom Nook duped me into thinking I bought myself a nice, quiet, relaxing, deserted island getaway, only to be trapped on said deserted island and being forced to develop it for him instead. And today we're gonna be expanding on that as we talk about all the little problematic things I found while playing Animal Crossing New Horizons. Alrighty, so as I mentioned, I hate returning to my island to discover a new neighbor or a new building or a new road's been built, and some of that is residual anger from the last video because I didn't understand how the game works. But the more I understand about how the game works, the more this anger is less about residual being duped into being bought into an island and more of a deeper nagging into the underlying issues that come with a game like Animal Crossing New Horizons. So as a kid, I was a total hippie. I was raised with a deep love and respect of nature, and like between the ages of 2 and 4, my best friends were 3 palm trees who lived in my grandmother's backyard. Their names were Kyle, Tina, and Miss Thang. Miss Thang, not Miss Thang, Miss Thang. So seeing that the point of this game was just to doze and develop and landscape your way into a perfect island in order to progress in the game and to gain money was kind of disheartening just on a surface level. But the more I played the game and the more things I noticed about it as we went on, it wasn't just, feeling bad about having to, pull up all the weeds, which a lot of them are like cuter than the flowers I have in my garden. So don't tell me what's a weed and what isn't. My favorite flowers are dandelions. Who said tulips were so great? It wasn't just about, chopping trees to get your Nook miles or going to one of the ticket mile islands and just, trashing it and dozing it to get all the tarantulas so you can become a millionaire. It gets a little deeper. It wasn't just disappointing. It was the longer I played, the more things I noticed, and I started to get more and more disturbed. I mean, it's a deserted island, but there's clearly early man fossils that are there. There's no consequences for any of the terraforming or destruction of land that you have. Everything regenerates at a certain point. You're destroying an island's natural resources for money. Like I mentioned, you go to these uncharted islands to reap them of all of their natural resources and for your own benefit, so much so that the pilot has to burn the flight plans afterwards, as I talked about in my last video. And just thinking of all those things, moving to an uninhabited island that no one's ever been to and being able to go to these places and reap all of the natural resources for your own enrichment with no consequences. Wait a minute, guys. This is just idealized colonialism. It's all the good things that colonialism brings to colonizers without any of the negative side effects. Like, there's nobody living on these islands when you move there or when you go visit them, and if they are, they're just other deserted island dwellers who might want to come and join you on your island. Which begs the question, if no humans ever lived there, why are there the early man fossils that you can dig up on your island? So if you guys haven't done the museum tour yet, the fossil section starts off with like early life, protozoan fossils, and then as you move through, you see little lines on the floor that show you through the course of evolution, and then at the very end, it shows you like a pig skeleton and a cow skeleton and a monkey skeleton or whatever, and then above each one, it shows like pictures of the different villagers, and there's a little spot for you to go up and stand, and the light turns on, and it shows you, the human, as the, most current stage of evolution. So there were humanoid people who lived on these islands at some point, but I guess long enough ago that it doesn't matter. And before we continue, I want to be very, very clear that this video, me None of this is an attack on anyone who enjoys and plays the game. Like, I love and enjoy and play the game, but my background and my family history means that I don't necessarily enjoy it in the same way that the people it's marketed to do. So, like, Kinder Bean, what are you talking about? You look exactly like the target audience for this game. True, and also not true. Looks can be very deceiving. My great-grandfather was a Cherokee Indian, and he grew up and as a child went through the Indian boarding schools.
So if you're from Africa, why are you white?
Oh my God, Karen, you can't just ask people why they're white.
And so my family history has a lot to do with him internalizing racism, bringing shame on the family to anyone who ever brought up our American Indian heritage, saying, no, we're not dirty, filthy Indians, don't ever talk about it, you're just tanned because you're a farmer, and always encouraging marrying white. And so there was a lot of stigma, not just in the surrounding communities. I know a lot of people don't see racism and racial prejudice against the Native American community unless you really live in and around the areas where you have reservations. But for him and his family, when they lived in Oklahoma, it was a very serious problem, and then when they moved out to California, they really tried to bury and suppress it, and so we had a lot of that internalized into our own family history. And so having to deal with that and having to come to terms with being comfortable with who you are means that being someone from a background who had negative experiences with colonialism means that you don't necessarily see things the way that everyone else does. You're more aware, more hyper-vigilant of things with these types of undertones and knowing what they can mean if they don't get recognized. And for those who know me personally, I didn't grow up with a lot of this necessarily. I grew up with a lot of the hush-hush, no, you're just white, don't worry about it. That happened a long time ago, they need to get over it, etc., etc. But the more I dug and the more I did research, I was able to uncover our family history, and my mom had actually lived on a Native American and Indian reservation for a time, and when I went there and we saw what life was like and seeing how people were living there and how people are still treated in such a horrific way in the 21st century, seeing that really changed the way that I saw the world. When you come from a marginalized community, be it racially, gender, sexual identity, disability, or ability, coming from a marginalized group really changes the way that you perceive the world with regards to the isms of the world. Racism, sexism, ableism, homophobia, etc., etc. And when I pointed these things out to a lot of my friends, and I'm definitely not the only person who noticed this, like Adam from Adam Ruins Everything had this tweet, and I was like, okay, it's not just me. When I pointed this out to a lot of my friends, an overwhelming response from my friends of all creeds and backgrounds was just like, haha, yeah, colonialism sucks, lol, you need some peaches. And that was kind of it. And that's all we really needed to have as far as that conversation went. It was like, yeah, I saw it too. Colonialism sucks. We can continue with the game, but we know that it has those undertones. And that's kind of it. I did occasionally get a Wakanda Forever as a joke, but there were some of my friends and some people on the internet who, when this information was presented to them, became very defensive and very uncomfortable. And I tried to go into explaining to them that there wasn't anything they needed to do, because I always get that, well, what am I supposed to do about it? A response from a lot of people when talking about things like ableism, sexism, LGBTQ rights, racism, systemic racism, and so forth. A lot of people who are on the outside or the privileged side of those conversations are like, okay, well, what am I supposed to do about it? So let's get into that. And as we get into that, I do want to make an acknowledgement that something that is very common across the geeky community is a deep, deep, hyper-fixated love of whatever your chosen fandom is. So like for me, I'm a huge fan of Harry Potter. You can see my mandrake root tapestry in the background. We're in my bedroom today because my partner is doing phone conferencing and I need the daylight. So Harry Potter, Game of Thrones, Disney movies, etc. I get really, really interested in them, and when people get really, really interested in those things, it's very common for people to tie a part of their identity, who they are, to that fandom. And so when something is brought up that's problematic within that fandom, it's often taken very personally and seen as, oh, well, if you think this fandom is problematic, then that means you think I'm problematic, you have a problem with me, you think I'm a bad person. And no, 99 times out of 100, that is not the case. The other one case typically being some sort of troll who's just looking for an argument. When someone brings this to your attention, it's probably because they come from one of those marginalized groups and they want you to be aware of it. They don't necessarily want you to do anything other than be aware that it has a tie to something problematic and that that problematic thing sucks. The content itself may not suck, unless it's Game of Thrones, in which case anything after season 4 does suck. Fight me about it in the comment section down below. And we see this in the non-geeky sphere as well. People, when having conversations about sexism, ableism, racism, when they're talking about something problematic, people often tie their gender, their sexual identity, their disabled status, their race to their identity. It's a part of how you know where you fit in the world. What boxes do you fit into? And so when people talk about problems with sexism, you get the, hashtag not all men response. And it's like, yeah, we know. And if we're friends with you, we're not talking about you. And if we are, we'll let you know. So just because you belong to that group or you enjoy that fandom, when something comes out that's problematic or people try to raise awareness about something, it doesn't have anything to do with you. They just want you to know, I just want you to know that this exists, and we need to, in the smaller cases, like it's a video game with colonizing undertones, be aware that it exists. Because at this point, there's really nothing you can do. It's a fun game, enjoy it, but not everybody gets to enjoy these things the same way. And when talking about this issue, where if you're geeky or in a non-geeky sphere where someone's talking about a systemic issue involving an ism that you may identify with someone on the privileged side, I myself have had issues with feeling that, being personally attacked because I belong to that group. But it took me years, literal years of personal growth and inward reflection and just emotional maturity to get to a place where, let's say, even though I do have Native American ancestry, I look white, y'all, in case you couldn't tell. I blend into my background. So when people talk about, white supremacy this, white supremacy that, like, I know they're not talking about me. I know they're talking about white people, and I occasionally am a white people, but I'm like, yeah, white supremacy sucks. Why are white people doing this? Boo. Like, I know they don't mean me. I know it's not about me. It's about the larger infrastructure. Now, that being said, if there's ever anything I can do when these issues come up and it's brought to my attention, like, hey, could you, raise awareness about this? Or, hey, could you make sure people in your company, when we're around, don't say blank or don't do Y? I absolutely make those accommodations because I am several boxes checked on the marginalized group list. And I know that it is so much easier to make a small change in your behavior, to make the lives of someone else better, to make something else easier for someone whose life is generally more difficult than yours, than it is to say, I get that, but you're making everyone else uncomfortable because you're talking about blankism. Could you just not when you're around my friends? Because oftentimes asking someone in that marginalized group to change their behavior when you're around people of privilege is really kind of a crummy thing to do. And now, a lot of the times it's presented in a way where it's like, hey, you know, you're really alienating a lot of your friends when you talk about blank. You need to remember, we're your friends, not your enemies. And it comes across as almost being concerned about that person's well-being. But when you do that, it's never really in the reciprocal. Because what you're saying is that everyone around you and yourself, when you're asking someone to do that, is saying that they wouldn't change their behavior for you because you're uncomfortable and there's actual harm that can come with these situations going unchecked. But they would rather you change your behavior, saying that we know this sucks, we know what we're doing makes you uncomfortable, but we're not going to change. Could you instead just be quiet about it? And that's not what we're about here at the Geek Suite. Now, when it comes to things like video games, it's very much benign, but when benign things exist and they go unchecked, it can create space for malicious intentions of this same ism to slide in through that crack in the door that was left open by the benign existence and representation. So for things like colonialism, yeah, Animal Crossing has these weird undertones and nobody really thinks twice about it unless you're in a society where those are big red flags to you. But when those things go unchecked, it furthers this narrative that's often presented in school histories and in media representation of colonial history that, oh, there was either nobody there or like the Aztecs and the Mayans. I remember learning in 3rd grade that they just mysteriously vanished. And I'm apparently not the only one, because when I was watching one of those awful Ghost Hunter spin-offs, he went to Mexico to look for the Chupacabra, and they're going through these ancient Mayan ruins, and this grown man says on cable television, it's just so bizarre knowing that there was this massive civilization here, and then just one day they mysteriously vanished. Like, dude, no. Like, I know they taught us that in 3rd grade, but by the time you got to high school, you knew what really happened. And then when you have this narrative that either they mysteriously vanished, or they're gone now, or yeah, it happened, but it was a long time ago, everything's changed since then, when it really hasn't. You get things like the Dapple Pipeline. There's a battle in Hawaii for Mauna Kea where they're fighting to keep another telescope from being built on their sacred reserved lands, where people are being pushed out of the way for development, even though that they have the rights to their lands, that they said they were offered money and they said no. So what do? We keep playing Animal Crossing. But we just know that when me or someone else or Adam comes along to ruin everything, we say, yeah, we know, it's dumb. Colonizers are dumb. Wakanda forever. How much are turnips on your island? And that's kind of it. Alright guys, so this turned out to be more of a PSA than an angry nerd rant, but yeah, it needed to be said. I needed to rant about it. Let me know what you guys think in the comment section down below. Is there no issue too small to be acknowledged? Am I making too big of a deal about it? As always, when leaving comments, be respectful, be kind, we love each other. It's a crazy time right now, emotions are really high, and I do know that a lot of people are using Animal Crossing as a way to connect with the outside world, to relieve the stress of everyday life. So I'm sorry if bringing up that it's rooted in colonialism made you uncomfortable, but I'm a little uncomfortable every time I play. But I still play, and I still enjoy it, and I still made a killing on my friend's island selling turnips today, so hey. Alrighty, my lovelies, that's all I've got for today. I am working on my next Yu-Gi-Oh! Crime series video, and I am working on getting my Kidner Bead Badly Reads manga series up for my Patreon patrons. That's a Patreon exclusive video series that I'm working on. So if you want to get into that, be sure to check out my Patreon page. I'll leave the link here and a clickable version in the description section down below. Patrons who make this channel possible, every donation, by video or by month, helps create videos like this and keep the lights on in the Geek Suite. And as all my lovely haters in the comment section would love to tell me I need to fix my lighting. So buy me some lights, y'all. Thank you so much for watching, my lovelies. Stay home, stay safe, and I will see you all next time.